me it's not working well, but um, my end it seems like it should be fine. It doesn't look like we're dropping frames. So I think we're live now. Um, yeah, perfect. Hopefully this is coming through clear for everybody. All three people we have here. I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. We got a huge audience here. Let's see here. So, did you get the link I sent you for? I believe his name was Brian's question. Yeah, and so I actually haven't dealt with that. I read the link and I was quite surprised. I mean, I guess I probably won't though because I never turn on my inverter when it's that low. So now, well, so I missed part of what you said there, but so you were able to charge it, but you didn't have it cut off. Is that what you said? Yeah. Interesting. I just got a comment that says we can't hear the guy in the blue, so I'm going to push a button to try to fix that real quick. I think that was me trying to make you not hear yourself. How about now if you say something? Let's see if they hear it.
Can everyone hear me?
I bet that comes through now. But you didn't hear an echo, did you?
I did.
Oh, you did hear an echo of yourself?
Yes.
Are you hearing that echo because you have the live stream pulled up and you're hearing audio from that too?
No, it's muted.
Oh boy, this is the problem with the output of this. Let's see here. Try talking again. I should be able to see if they're gonna hear it or not. Nope, they're not. Shoot, you are gonna hear an echo. I thought we had this figured out. What? Oh, you know what? Hold on. Actually, I mean you're gonna hear an echo currently. It's probably annoying, isn't it? If you're talking.
Yes.
we're nailing this. I got to figure it out as we go.
Bear with us, guys. We're still learning.
I would think everything I've done, you shouldn't have heard them. We did this yesterday, the same settings.
What about your mic input into Skype?
Um, you know what? That's not the worst idea I've ever heard. Let's see here. Skype preferences. Oops, I got it on the wrong screen. Is that any better on your end if you talk?
Let's see. Yep.
Oh, perfect. Problem solved.
Awesome. So I guess we can kind of start over there.
Yeah.
Essentially, I did a discharge test on my Tesla batteries, which I'm in a 48 volt Quattro inverter. Discharge down to about 10%. Basically, let the inverter get down to its low voltage cutoff. Let it cut off, and then turn the system off. Watch the voltage bounce back 1, 2 volts, whatever it bounced back after the load came off of the battery bank, and then plugged back up to shore power. And the inverter almost immediately started charging back once I turned the inverter back on. So I did not experience that same problem being reported. Um,
See, I
but
wonder. I wonder if that's eliminated because you did plug into shore power. Because my guess is that once it sees shore power, then it kind of bypasses a low voltage cutoff because
okay,
it
yeah, and
sees power.
I didn't even think to run it down to 30, 40% charge
Mm-hmm.
status of the bank and turn the inverter off. I don't,
Yeah,
with the
I've
bank
never
as
done
large
that.
as mine or yours, I don't know that we would ever really do that anyways, especially with having solar. But
Yeah,
um,
every time I go to my RV, it's like 98% or whatever. I left it at the last time I was done because even if we draw the batteries down pretty heavily, the night before, which honestly we never get that low, but by the time we drive home, it's charged while we're on the freeway. It's fully charged by the time we're back. And so I've never tried to turn my inverter on after it's below whatever 50%. I think is what the article says here, which I can pull up for people. I think. Let's see here. Um, there we go. It should
and
come
that's
up.
definitely kind of a concern because I could see scenarios where you would maybe turn your inverter off to conserve some power in that 40% range and then want to turn it back on early the next morning to make some coffee before the sun's up. So I could definitely see that being an issue or a concern. I just personally haven't experienced it.
Yeah, certainly. That would actually, yeah, that would really stink. So I think this should go up. I'm trying to add
And I
the.
guess maybe the workaround is if you have a small generator or whatever, you could crank your generator for the 5 minutes it takes to get the inverter started back with shore power. And then once your inverter's back running, then at that point, you could turn the generator back off again.
Sure. Yeah, that would certainly do it. Now that's probably going to look really ugly on the live stream for a second while I played with all that. There we go. Mark asked what size battery banks we're talking about. Mine is 10.6 kilowatt hours of theoretical power. I don't use anywhere near that. I'm sure the realistic answer is probably closer to 8. And yours is 30, right?
That's correct. So you've got 2 modules, right? And
Yep.
I've got 6.
Yep. What ended up making you go with 48 volts? Just lower amperage.
Um, yes, and the guy I bought my battery modules from, uh, kind of I stumbled upon him actually from eBay, and he's located in Kentucky, and he's actually building these 6 Tesla modules in a little box for one of the major cell phone carriers, and they're actually using these as battery backups in cell
Oh
phone
wow.
towers. And so they're actually using 48-volt Quattros, um, actually 2 Quattros because they need 240-volt service, 6 Tesla modules, and then the EVTV BMS that I'm using. And they have those deployed in like 70 plus cell phone towers already
Wow.
and have had zero problems out of them.
That's
And
very
so that's
cool.
kind of, I just followed that same design concept as he's using. If the major cell phone carriers are willing to buy into that technology, I felt like it was good enough for me too. So
Sure. Yeah, I ended up staying with 24 volts only because when I looked up the buck boost converters, I used a Victron Orion for 24 to 12 volt. I couldn't find anything that had a big enough 48 to 12 volt setup. So it was they were minimal. It was like 15 amps, 20 amps, or whatever. Did you find something that works pretty well for that?
I have a 30 amp, 48 volt to 12 volt converter, and then I have a really small, like 20 amp hour AGM battery
Oh, okay. So it charges
in
it.
line there, just kind of handling the slot outs and the front jacks and that kind of stuff. And I haven't seen a problem as of yet, at least. And those AGM batteries are $40-50 at your local whatever Batteries Plus store, whatever you guys may have there. And
Right.
so I just decided just to throw that in there on the cheap to kind of subsidize the 12-volt system.
Okay. Yeah. I when I did the system before I actually built it, I was playing with all the things and watching the 6-point leveling as well as the slides were pulling like 45 amps. So at 15 amps, I was like, I'm sure this is never going to work out in this giant trailer. But I didn't end up really considering the 12-volt battery all that much.
And I don't know that I
though.
really need it. I haven't really seen peak loads heavier than 30 amps as of yet. I've got an older rig, so I don't have 6-point leveling hydraulic system. Mine's just a real basic 12-volt motor on my front landing gears. And my slide outs, my main slide has a 20 amp fuse. My bedroom slide has a 10 amp fuse. So neither of those are anywhere close to tripping a 30 amp load. So I could probably get away without the battery, but I just basically, if my BMS disconnects my battery bank and I didn't have a battery, I would lose all 12-volt power in the rig altogether. So I always like having just, even if it's only an hour's worth of 12-volt, I still like the idea of having that.
That actually makes me realize that if my Orion went out, I would be in the dark completely. Yep. All of our lighting's 12-volt.
Yeah, if money were no object and budget were just infinite, I would have probably the 50 amp hour Battleborn in line in my 12-volt system, but I just can't justify the amount of money for my 12-volt system, at least at this point.
Right. No, that makes sense. Now, with years of the 5,000 watt Quattro, have you run both air conditioners at the same time pretty successfully?
Well, I've only had it installed about 3 months, so we haven't really been in North Alabama where I'm at. Haven't had hot enough days to really run the air conditioning heavy load level. So I ran a couple space heaters and microwave all at once. I drew right at 5,000, 5,300 watts continuous out of it for a couple minutes without any issue.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
Did you do the soft starts on your ACs?
Nope.
Oh, yeah, neither have I. But I did notice on the newer trailer that the spike, the initial amp draw is much lower than my last one. I wouldn't be surprised if they have some sort of a, capacitor or whatever built into them from the factory.
Yeah, I'll definitely get to do some better testing. We're actually going to be headed down to Florida later this summer, and so we'll be doing some better testing in the hot climates there. But I don't anticipate with the Quattro 5000. I believe maybe I wouldn't want to start both airs at the same time, but as long as I'm starting them one at a time, I don't think I'll have any issues there. So
I've considered swapping over to I guess maybe I haven't thought of going to a Quattro, but I think we talked about this before. My main reason for sticking with the Multiplus was just that with 5,000 watts, I didn't want to get myself in trouble and start using 5,000 watts when I don't have a way to keep making 5,000 watts,
Sure.
So, but I've thought about either going with a bigger one or going with 2 Multipluses. So.
Yeah, and the only reason I really, 2 pieces actually. The biggest factor of what I chose inverter-wise is space. I was limited to a very small cabinet under our TV where the Quattro and BMS and all that stuff lives, and that space is only like 30 inches wide by 30 inches tall by 12 inches deep. It's very minimal, small cabinet inside my rig, and so I did not have a place for 2 Multipluses, and so that factored out the Multiplus pretty quick, and so that's really why I ended up going to the Quattro and so forth.
I didn't spend enough time looking at them when I was buying. I think I legitimately just kind of looked at the Multiplus and was done at that point. How much more power, or like what's the advantage to the Quattro over the Multiplus other than larger? Are there any?
It has 2 AC inputs, so you can have a second AC input. Like basically, I'm going to actually have. I'm not finished with this part yet, but I've got my main shore power cord, and then I'm going to have a second shore power cord hook up like right into the 5th wheel, so I can basically set my little Honda portable generator in the back of the truck and just have a real short cord from there to to my second shore input, and basically you can set the Quattro where your shore input, the second input will automatically take precedence. So anytime the generator's plugged up to that second shore input and working, it automatically takes priority and switches automatically for you. So there's
Yeah.
no manually having to switch anything.
Yeah, my rig came with a auto transfer switch from the factory. It's designed for, obviously 50 amps at the rear of the trailer, and it has an electric cord reel, which it's like the weakest 12-volt motor you've ever felt in your life. I'm just expecting, sooner or later that's going to quit. But in the front of it, it was designed for a propane generator. I think it's a 5,500 watt Onan, and it's got the install kit and everything. So
Okay.
there was already a box there basically to wire AC power into. So I wired in a basic extension cord. It's like it starts at 50 amps, but I adapt it down to whatever, so I can do the same thing at the front of the trailer. And that was nice to have that auto transfer switch there, because now I just keep I use a Westinghouse 2,500 watt generator, and and it's basically a Honda. I keep it in the front of the trailer in that same spot that the original propane generator was supposed to be. And so I can just pull it out, and it's like a 2-foot cord, and it's right there. It's super handy. Although since I've done it, or since I've done the solar, we haven't had to use a generator at all.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically when I was trying to decide between Multiplus and Quattro, by the time I added the cost of the Multiplus that I would need, and then a transfer switch separate, and if you start reading reviews of those ATS $200-300 transfer switches, there's a lot of mixed reviews about failure rates and so forth. And I said, well, I'm just going to put everything in one unit. Victron
Sure.
stands behind it, warranted all together. There's no having to second guess different components to troubleshoot. So that's the reason I went with the Quattro.
Yeah. No, they look nice. I mean, it actually blows me away when I see that they use them, like stacked on top of each other for huge, huge environments. More or less, it seems like they're using them as a UPS battery, backup for instant power.
Yep, that's exactly what it is in the cell phone tower space that I was talking about earlier. I'm not sure if my audio was working when I was talking about that, but
Oh
um,
yeah, I don't think it was. That was probably before.
yeah. So any rate there, this one installer that I stumbled upon, where I bought my batteries from, is actually building these systems for use in cell phone towers as battery backup. Basically, these remote locations, they have hard time even getting propane to the propane generators that they use at some of these cell phone tower sites. So they're actually installing a Quattro with 6 Tesla modules in some of these cell phone sites to handle power outages, and they're running these cell phone towers for about 2 days on those 6 modules without having to do any recharging of the batteries. So I
Are
was pretty
they
impressed by that.
are they including solar there at all, or no?
Not currently. That's just basically the FCC requirements, or if you lose power, they have to run for X amount of time without a contingency plan of, a portable generator or however they power those sites. So basically, they're just putting enough battery capacity to run the tower to meet the government requirements for those.
And you said it was 6 of them?
Yep, they're using 6 modules.
Wow, I'm surprised that 6 modules would run 2 days for a cell phone tower. I mean, in my head, I would have expected a cell phone tower, burning through, 3,000, 4,000 watts or whatever.
Yeah, he was saying that the radios on the towers, like all the radios combined, are only like an 800 watt load. It's all the data pieces and the HVAC air conditioning that are the bigger load than the actual radio is.
So if they lose power, do they shut off the HVAC? Because I mean, there's no way you're gonna run HVAC for 2 days on that power.
Yeah, I'm not sure the contingency there, but
Wow. Sitting here looking at, I got another question somewhere and I can't find it. We've only got 6 of us in here. We got to do a better job of advertising, and I think you and me probably count as 2 of those.
anyone in the chat have questions?
Let's see where there was. Mike commented. Is that the same Mike that's in here? No. So there's someone Mike in here commented that he couldn't really hear us, so I boosted the volume. It's loud on my end. I don't know if anybody else can't hear it. but it'll at least be a learning experience.
So what kind of loads have you ran on your multiplus so far?
I've literally run everything in the trailer. The reality, I think, is that we have a lot more solar than we probably need. I mean, this whole project came because every time we'd go out to the lake, I got so sick and tired of going outside. And at the time, I would use two Champion 3,500 watt generators in in parallel together to power the both air conditioners. And in the summer here, it can be 105 degrees or whatever at some of the lakes we go to. So more or less, they run all day long, and I got so tired of going out there every like 3 or 4 hours and refilling super hot generators with gas, in the middle of the day in the sun. So I really just wanted to be able to like run one air conditioner. I thought was like the ultimate goal, which inherently made a large system with a lot of power. But aside from running that air conditioner, we don't really use like that much power. I mean, we've got some TVs, but they're LED TVs, and we do have the residential refrigerator. But I have to say it doesn't seem to use all that much power. Like I'm sure if you had a smaller setup with like 100 or 200 watts, that probably would contribute. It would be a really big power drop. But for us, the average usage is just the LED lights in the ceiling, the heater, the fridge, the microwave for a few minutes in the morning or whatever. It's like 5 or 10 minutes at most if we use it. And then the TV and we also have kind of residential Wi-Fi in there, and I stream out a bunch of videos more or less through Plex. I started using a different service called Emby. But with standard use, we wake up in the morning after probably 12 or 14 hours since the sun's gone down, and we're usually at 75 to 80% battery left. And I don't know how else we could even close to use the rest of the power, which is kind of nice. So, and this has basically always been tested in the winter. So, I think I finished it in August or September or something like that. And that's kind of when this, or maybe it was October, I don't remember, but the sun started being a lot lower to the ground. And, we haven't even had a full sunny day, which I think is kind of similar to you, right? Yours hasn't been done in the summer.
Correct. Yeah, and the guy I was talking about earlier that I bought the Tesla modules from, I walked into his shop where they take all these Tesla cars and break them down, and over in the middle of his shop, he has this big 45-foot diesel pusher with a
Wow.
tag axle. I mean, massive unit. And so I asked him naturally if he's selling these Tesla modules and installing all these Victron equipment. What do you have in your rig? And he said, well, if I had it to do over again, I would do a 48-volt system, but he had a 24-volt system with 6 modules.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he can run both of his air conditioners, or 2 out of the 3 of his air conditioners. Let me rephrase that. He can run 2 air conditioners for 12 hours through the night and still have battery in the morning left over. So
Jeez.
that's kind of what sold me. It's like, okay, if you can do that with 6 modules, that's what I want to.
See,
And
somebody
so,
asked me about that the other day, and maybe it was the last live chat. I don't remember what it was, but they were asking about running 2 air conditioners. I think it was somebody messaged me on Facebook about it. And, they were kind of asking about what size battery bank they need, and it was only for travel days, I believe. Let's see if I can pull it up. But anyhow, it was like when it boiled down, it was, you were pulling out so much power overnight. I think he was going to be down in Florida in the summer or something like that. And he said it doesn't get below like 90 and the humidity is like 80% or whatever it is. And, I said, sure, you can definitely build a big enough battery bank for that. I mean, just start stacking more, modules. But how much solar are you really going to have? Like if you legitimately eat through, 20 kilowatt, 30 kilowatt hours in a night, there's no amount of solar you're going to put on an RV that's going to even close to charge that the next day. I mean,
exactly. I have every square inch of my roof is a solar panel. If you've seen any of the pictures, I
yep.
got 3,360 watts. And even in the best of Florida sun, you're going to maybe get 2,600 watts for 6-7 hours a day.
Yep.
So I'm not even going to be able to refill my batteries to 50% there. So if you're running it dead at night, you're going to expect to run portable generator, at least 4, 5, 6 hours a day just to get your batteries back charged for the night.
Well,
and for some people that may be okay to run your generator 5, 6 hours during the day and then not have to listen to a generator while you sleep. That may be okay, but
what
I don't know
occurred
that
to
I
me
want to go
with
that route.
that is I thought the exact same thing. I was like, okay, well, the next day, if you had, let's say, 3 kilowatts on the roof, you could maybe get 6 hours worth of that. You'd put a fair amount back in. But if you need air conditioning for 12 hours at night, you're going to need it all day long too. So your solar's worthless. It's like at best you're maybe keeping up with some of the amp draw from your 2 air conditioners during the day, but as you've seen, and just like me, like the most you can really get on the top of an RV is somewhere near 3, I mean, let's just call it 4,000 watts even. You're not going to be able to really keep up with 2 air conditioners all day long. So if you're running them all day, you're kind of just like staving off a dead battery or maybe eating into it a little bit, but you're certainly not charging it. And even with even your Quattro, like how many amps can that even put into the battery bank, even if you had your generator running? Like you probably have to run it for like 10 hours to recharge the battery, right?
Yeah, so my Quattro has a 70 amp at 48-volt charger, so it can put 3.5 kilowatts per hour back into the battery bank.
Yeah, so if you were
So if
dead,
you
you're
had
like
that
nine
plus your
hours.
solar, I could with my solar panels, which it during the day there again, if you're running the air conditioning during the day, the solar and your load draw is pretty much going to be a wash.
Yep.
And so
So
yeah, you'd have to run your generator 6, 7, 8+ hours a day to be able to recharge and make it through the night.
that
In my rig, thankfully, we're 32 feet inside space, fairly small in comparison to today's rigs. So
mhm,
one air conditioner keeps during the nighttime. One air conditioner keeps our rig plenty comfortable to sleep. So
sure.
I just don't see the need in running 2 air conditioners through the night.
See, I've got 2 assumptions, I guess, for that. So my first one, where we are in in Reno, Nevada, the high desert, it cools down quite a bit as soon as the sun goes down. So even like let's say it's a 100-degree day, sun sets in the summer, I don't know what, 8:30 or whatever, and by 9:30 at night, you've dropped probably down to 70, 75. Like it's a significant difference. You can actually get kind of chilly at night in the high desert. So all we really end up doing is just opening up, cracking a window and then firing up one of the vent fans in the ceiling, like a Fantastic fan or whatever. So there's like zero draw there. It's like 12 watts or whatever. And then my other thought is in the summer, my rig's 41 feet and it's wide body and tall ceilings. I think in the living room the ceilings are like 9.5 feet tall. I was thinking I would need to run 2 air conditioners all the time when it's hot out, but what I noticed is that when I didn't have solar, I would kind of wait to turn the air conditioning on until it like got hot, because I'd have to go outside and turn on a generator. But now I think what I'm going to do is as soon as there's enough sun out or close to generate enough power to run an air conditioner, I'm just going to stay ahead of it. So like even if I wake up in the morning and it's like 68 degrees in the RV, I might turn the air conditioning on and get it down to 66 and just kind of stay ahead of the heat. And that way, in a perfect world, if I run the air conditioner all day because I'm only trying to run one, I kind of am hoping that at the end of the day I have a fully charged battery and an air conditioner that ran all day. But I imagine down where you are with humidity, it probably doesn't work out so good.
Yeah, there's not a night we can turn the air conditioning off in the summertime. I mean, it's just about you turn your air conditioner on to get rid of the sticky in the south. So,
Man, that's crazy. I think a high humidity day here is like 25% or 30% or whatever. We're without any kind of water in the air, and I lose it when I go places like that. I can't stand it. It feels like I need a shower instantly. Well, I don't see that we're getting any other questions, so I don't is anybody still in the chat? I mean, I see that we're 6 people watching. I got to start doing a better job of advertising this stuff, but at least tonight we learned that it apparently does stream well. And everything's been working on my end. I learned that I was quiet though, so I got that turned up, and we fixed your echo.
a couple more times at this, we might even become pros.
Yeah, no, I've been looking at some things that could make it a lot nicer, and I talked to Rob and he said he wants to do something at some point, but he's doing some medical stuff. And then I also talked to Sean from Battleborn. He said he'd love to get on and have a chat, which I imagine we could probably have him, post that they're going to do questions and answers or whatever, and we could have a whole bunch of people in here. So, well, I guess if there's no other questions, I don't know why there would be 6 people here, even if you and me are 2 of them and nobody else is saying anything. So, anyhow, we'll try and do it again next week. Let's see when. Oh, Mike again, or Mark, I'm sorry. Victron color display, the color control GX. I assume that's what he's talking about. I do use one of those. Do you?
I do. I have a color GX BMV 712. Pretty much, I have all Victron gear.
Mm-hmm.
It just integrated so well. I decided to stick with it.
Yeah, I enjoy mine. I think Rob posted something about there's a new screen that came out from Victron just the other day, and I didn't look at it at all. The comments made it sound like it wasn't as good as the color control GX. I do love that screen. I think it was probably one of the most overpriced things I've bought for my solar. It was like $400 or $500, and but I wanted it purely because there wasn't a good app. I kind of just wanted to be able to dork out and see how much power was coming in and how much was being inverted and all that. And prior to that, I had to use the 2 different Bluetooth apps so I could see the charge controller and then see the Victron's battery monitor, so I could kind of figure out exactly what was going on.
Yeah, I kind of debated. You can also the software that runs on the Color GX is open source, I believe, at least a piece of it, and you can actually run it on a Raspberry Pi. But some of the reviews I read about that were kind of flaky, and so I just decided, okay, I'm just going to spend the money and pay Victron for what work they've done. I believe you're really paying more for their software than you are for the hardware, because there can't be that much money hardware-wise in it. And so I installed day one with a Color GX, the BMV, the Quattro, big charge controller. So I kind of just took the plunge and did it all at once. And it's kind of funny. I ventured down into the solar path kind of a strange way. My fridge in my rig died. The ammonia tank that's in the back of a conventional RV fridge burst, and ammonia just went everywhere. I mean, I walked into the rig and I just about,
Really?
couldn't walk in there and breathe. It was just bad.
Is that common?
And so, well, my rig's 10 years old. And so after that point, it's pretty common to have to do a refurb on RV style fridges. And so I went down the road of what's it going to cost to refurb, $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 to fix and this is just the small 8 cubic foot fridge. Yeah. There's nothing fancy about it. And so I've decided, okay, I'm going to rip this thing out and put a residential fridge in. And so that's what I did. Went to Home Depot, found a residential fridge that was close to the same size, demoed the cabinet out, put a new residential fridge in there. I said, okay. So went down the road, got the residential fridge put in, and I went and bought 12 volt Ames inverter. It was a 12 volt, 2000 watt inverter. And it ran fine. I just had 2 6-volt golf cart batteries that I'd had in the rig for a couple of years. I've had several sets before that. I probably put 3 or 4 sets of 6-volt batteries in my rig over the years. And,
I feel like my 6 volts always went bad within like a year or two. It was, and
I usually got 2 years out of them. Now I'll be the first to say I didn't take care of them. I might check the water once a year in them, so I never was religious about regularly checking and maintaining batteries. And that's the reason I have lithium batteries now. There's no maintenance really required to them as long as you keep them warm in the winter and for the most part take care of the low voltage, high voltage cutoffs. For the most part, they take care of themselves. And so went down the path. Decided, okay, I want something small solar wise to put on the roof to keep the fridge running while we're traveling on travel days, and ended up with 3,000 watts on the roof. So I'm not really sure how I went from a little bit of solar to a lot of bit of solar, but when I took the plunge, I went big.
That happened to me too. It sounds like a similar story to me, except I didn't have a fridge, blow up ammonia everywhere. But my last two or three trailers, I can't remember, have all had residential refrigerators, and I've kind of always gone down to Costco, bought a pair of 6-volt batteries. I then went and did 4 of them on my last trailer, just because the run time on a residential fridge, especially in the summer when the whole trailer is kind of cooking, was pathetic. And I hated the cheap batteries. It made me never go buy like the Victron battery monitor kit. And so I was completely relying on, either the little gauge on the wall that gives you, a third full or 2/3, like the least accurate thing in the world. Or, I told myself I would do a better job, and what I would use is just I modified a cigarette lighter plug, and I would plug that into a spot, and it would tell me the exact voltage that the system had. And so I could come up with like a relatively good idea of how much power I had left, but it was always just weak. And I did the same thing as you. I would never actually take care of my batteries. Maybe at, the beginning of the summer, if I like happened to look at a battery and it looked like it boiled something out or whatever, I might put more water in there. But going to lithium was just like, it seemed like a logical step to stop worrying about power, and my girlfriend, it was always a pain. Like the trailers came with a built-in inverter, since they had the residential fridge, but it was always the minimal inverter, like whatever would basically run the fridge. And so we'd wake up in the morning, or maybe she'd get up before me, wants to make coffee or whatever, use power of some sort. And it was basically, well, hey, can you go start the generator? I'm like, I don't want to go start the generator at 7:30 in the morning just so you can make a cup of coffee and I can go shut it off again. So I thought, I got to do something that powers the fridge, for a longer period of time. Also because out here we might go out to a lake called Pyramid Lake, and sometimes for the bigger days of the year, like 4th of July, you've got to drop your trailer off 4 or 5 days ahead of time. It's on Indian land, and it's basically first come first serve, so you have to pay for extra days, and there's going to be thousands of people out there. So I would drop the trailer off 3 or 4 days early at least, and we'd want to leave our food in there, and I'd end up having to go out there again during the week and recharge the batteries with the generator for a few hours, or risk, I mean, there were times I went out there and the fridge was just off. So I ended up deciding I would do something that was going to be bigger. And kind of like you, as soon as I went down that rabbit hole, it was just like, well, if I'm already doing 2,000 watts, it's it's not that hard to do 2,500, or I think it started smaller than that, but it actually, it seems to get cheaper as you go bigger. It seems like the initial investment or the decision to do some sort of solar, you may as well go bigger and bigger. And I think probably the same as you, I saved so much money buying used solar panels that it made my project overall like relatively inexpensive, because I see people in these groups and they're going and buying panels and they're like happy if they're $1 a watt or whatever it is. And that would have been huge for my project. I was able to get my 2,520 watts up on my roof. I paid $600 total for all of them.
I was similar. I ended up buying a lot of 20 panels. I paid $1,400 plus a $200 freight fee, so I've got $1,600 in 20 panels worth of. I've got 16 of those on the roof, and 4 of them I may end up building a small ground deploy array. I haven't fully decided yet. But
I've thought about that as well, but then I more or less, I feel like I could probably pull it off, but I feel like I would need a second charge controller. And at that point, I'm like, again, we haven't hit the day where I've even close to needed any extra power, and I'm sure this summer will be a little more telling. But I think, inherently it comes down to air conditioning for power usage for us, probably for you as well. I mean, you're not going to use 30 kilowatt hours, of TV or whatever. So I always assumed, especially here in the high desert, that if I need air conditioning, it's inherently a very sunny day. And so I should be making a lot of power. And so far that's held true. Even in the late season, it was actually easy because one air conditioner is only pulling about 1,800 watts. And so it was pretty easy for me to make 1,800 with, 2,500 watt system. So I'm hoping that works out in the summer.
Yeah, and the biggest advantage I see of let's say a small ground deploy array, if I used four of my panels, 210 watts apiece, so I'd have an 800-watt ground deploy array.
Mm-hmm.
Is a couple of the parks that we could go to. I could potentially park my rig in the shade and
Yep.
then set my ground deploy out in the sun. And if it's a nice time of the year in the shade, 800 watts, pretty much handles the fridge and the TVs and all that kind of stuff. If you don't need air conditioning,
Yeah.
that's kind of my mindset is I'd rather park the rig in the shade and
Yeah.
in that time of the year when it's comfortable and I can have the windows open anyways, and then park in the sun, obviously, if I need air conditioning. But
Sure.
that's kind of my mindset of the ground deploy array that I would like. And I already own the panels. I wouldn't really worry about expanding my charge controller. I would basically just add those ground deploy panels in parallel with all the stuff on my roof and only use them in the event that
Yeah, I mean,
it was a
that
low
makes sense.
output day, or I don't really foresee needing. I think my charge controller can handle right at 3,300 watts.
Which charge controller did you get?
I have the 70 amp, I believe, but I'm at 48 volts. So
Right. Yeah, I have the 100 amp at 24 volts. So they're probably actually yours is probably higher. Yeah, amount you could put in.
yes.
Mark asked if a software update is always necessary on the MultiPlus. I'd love to give a really intelligent answer to that. The ones that I've seen come out, I think have been posted in the Facebook groups. I don't even, I'm not in my trailer enough in the winter to, actually check and see if, anything pops up. I think the last one was relatively important though. There was some issue. We could look it up, but there was something that made sense to really do the update for. Other than that, I don't know why you wouldn't do it. I mean, it's pretty easy to get, some form of data, whether that's through your phone or, you could do it when next time you're at an RV park or whatever, but I don't see why you couldn't do it pretty quickly. I mean, the updates I've done, I think they've all gone, well, maybe not on the MultiPlus. On the charge controller and things like that, it just goes through my phone just when you do Bluetooth. But if I remember correctly, which it's sad, I haven't used my trailer a lot lately. I don't think you can Bluetooth to a charge controller or a MultiPlus. So
yeah, the MultiPlus, as far as a firmware update goes, it's a manual process, and it's actually kind of hard to find. I uploaded the newest firmware that was available when I installed my Quattro, and MultiPlus Quattro, it's the same portal you go to get the firmware. But the biggest advantage of the newer firmware for me was being able to lower the Shure input limit. The Quattro that I had initially had around a 18 or 19 amp was the minimum input. And of course, if you're using a single Honda or whatever 2,000 watt generator, that's way too much power for a small gen set. And so they lowered the input limit on the Quattro at least to 13 amps, which handles okay on one gen set. I've got two I can run in parallel if I need to, but
yeah, I don't know why what is and not that either of us have the answer, but I don't know what the logical answer is as to why they have such a high limit. Why couldn't it be 2 amps, 3 amps? I don't know what would stop that, because I think the same update I did on mine, and I thought it got down to like 10 amps that you could pull.
And in the 24 volt, some of the smaller MultiPluses, they do go lower than the Quattro, and I'm not sure what the difference is. I'm sure there's some technical answer for it that is over our head, but
sure.
But yeah, that's the big reason. I don't know personally. The firmware update's not required. If I were going to be off grid boondocking for 2-3 weeks, I don't know that I would want to do a firmware update and leave myself
right
up a creek with no power. So I would probably want to wait till I had a conservative backup plan as far as shore power hookups or anything. But yeah, I haven't had any issues of any firmware updates. The charge controller, BMV, all those software updates are just done straight over Bluetooth in your app, so that's been painless. But
maybe
the
that
firmware was
a
little more difficult.
I think it was a charge controller firmware update that needed to be done for some reason. That was probably 3 to 6 months ago. But yeah, anything that goes over Bluetooth, I guess to answer Mark, is I do just inherently. I think it kind of, when I turn it, I first connect to it, it says, hey, this needs to update. So I just do it. Um,
Yeah, and I don't think it'll let you continue without
right.
doing an
Yep.
update on the charge controller or the BMV. So
Yep.
that's at least my experience is it forces you to do it.
Mm-hmm. And then on the MultiPlus, I don't know that I've updated it since I kind of did the initial settings, but I think that was right after a new update had come out. But you know what I have to say, I don't love the way they make you buy some adapter to connect to it. I think it's like, goes from an Ethernet Cat5 to USB or whatever, and I just have to imagine that could have been done without an additional
Oh,
adapter or whatever.
it's really just a USB serial port to essentially a rollover cable. Like if you're ever done any network equipment work, that's all it is. But they just made it proprietary to work with their system.
When I had it all show up and I realized that I needed to go in there and kind of like actually program it, because I don't even think I looked it up beforehand. I just assumed it could be done via Bluetooth. And so I was like, oh, really? Now I got to do this. And I wanted it so bad, I just ended up ordering it, and I had it in like a day or two. But I felt the same way with like the Victron. I can't remember whatever their net stuff is. They use proprietary weird cables. I don't understand why they don't just go use Cat5 between everything. It'd be so much easier. But I guess obviously wouldn't make any money.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the cables that run between the BMV and the charge controller and the CGX.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember what's that. It's Victron. I don't know, AnyNet or something like that. Whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't recall off the top of my head. I know they're cheap because the supplier that I ordered my inverter from threw those in. I said, oh, and I need these cables. He said, okay, well, since you're buying the inverter, I'll throw those in.
Yeah.
So I know they didn't cost a lot, but any rate, it is a shame that it's proprietary.
I just had a problem with kind of trying to know exactly how long they needed to be. So it was like I had to order them, and they're like, well, do you want a 1.8 meter or, whatever the other size was? And like the difference in length was huge. It was like, from 6 feet to 12 feet or whatever. And I like kind of had to snake them through a wall to my Color Control GX. So I had to like guess. And it just would have, as somebody who has a ton of Cat5 or whatever sitting around, it just would have been so nice to just make up a cable in the house and be done.
Yep.
So we've got 2 more people that have joined. I don't know if they have questions, but if you do, post something and we'll hopefully be able to answer it. Otherwise, I don't want to just sit here and take up a bunch of time chatting back and forth, not answering anybody's questions. But we did learn a lot. I mean,
we're not holding them hostage for sure.
That's right.
So
yeah, they don't.
As long as we have stuff to talk about, then it'll be fine.
That's right. I didn't think about it like that. Oh, and Stacy asked about what a tiny house, how much power a tiny house will need. Funny enough, that's actually my mom. So she's building a tiny house, and we've had this conversation many times. And I think she's like me. She wants to put solar on and have that ability to be off grid and not have to worry about relying on people, which is part of what I like about having solar is that now I'm pretty much completely off grid. But she's not going to be off grid. She's going to be plugged in, and so I'm always trying to tell her there's really no sense in spending thousands and thousands of dollars to have a system that likely will never be used, as well as the fact that it just continually gets cheaper. I think it makes sense that we run a couple of wires up to the roof. We can tuck them under something, and in the future, if she decides to do solar, then we've got the pre-wire there. But otherwise, just build it normal and don't waste money on, like at a minimum, you're going to have, maybe 2 Tesla modules or whatever, and that's going to cost you $2,500 or whatever. And, obviously thousands. I mean, it's probably realistic to think you could spend $5,000 or $10,000 quickly to power a tiny house.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I've always thought if I had a place to park my rig, essentially we already have tiny houses. They were just manufactured by somebody else. I always thought if I had the land, if I had a half acre or acre place to park, that I would rather have a separate ground deployment system that's basically got my panels on it. Cause as you know, we're limited by roof space more than anything else. And the solar panels realistically are the cheapest part of it all. Charge controller panels, those are fairly cheap. I mean, you could put a 10,000 watt system in for, $3,000 worth of equipment. So
Yeah, it's batteries, and to me, it doesn't make sense, for somebody to buy thousands of dollars of batteries and all the associated equipment, all the heavy gauge wiring and connectors and Bluetooth stuff to basically just have it sit there and rot. I mean, let's think 5 years down the road, if somebody actually decides to take their tiny house and go off the grid or whatever, the batteries are just going to be that much cheaper in 5 years. There's going to be plenty more wrecked Teslas, and I'm sure there will be new evolutions, and even Battleborn batteries will be cheaper. I mean, I've got two of them over here on the wall, and I'm sure in 5 years those prices will just be lower and probably better technology too.
yeah, I don't foresee the Tesla batteries getting cheaper in the near future. I see 5 years from now, maybe everything getting cheaper. But
Right.
the supplier I bought the Tesla batteries for said, if anything, actually the wrecked cars are getting more expensive. And
Mm-hmm.
where a year and a half ago he could buy a scrapped car and get the batteries out of it and pretty much just sell the rest of the car to the scrap metal place.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's actually having to part the car pieces out just to even break even on the car he's scrapping out for the batteries.
Right.
And so I think they're still getting more expensive day by day, week by week right now. But at some point there will probably be kind of a turn back in the market value of the salvaged Tesla cars.
Right. Now, have you looked into the Model 3 batteries at all? I haven't
I
spent
did a
enough
little bit. I
time.
don't know if you've watched any of Jack Richard or Ricard's videos on
Mm-mm.
YouTube. He's the guy that is the brains behind the EVTV BMS that I have, and he does some really in-depth stuff. And they've got a couple or three Model 3s right now that they've torn down, but the Model 3 batteries are not even close to the same concept as the
Right.
Model S batteries. And so, at least in the near future, there's no BMS to manage them. There's no standardization as far as standard voltage where they work as easily
Right.
with inverters on the market. So I think that'll be a down the road thing.
What does each module end up putting out? I thought it was like like you said, a really weird voltage.
Yeah, and there's two in the car. I think there's two different voltage packs as well. They're not all the same.
Oh, wow. Well,
I don't know that
they
for
didn't do
sure,
us any
but
favors. And Mark is correct. A VE direct cable. That sounds totally right. That's what it was.
yeah.
Which they work fine, but I don't really love having to have proprietary cables. And I don't know what pieces you're talking about that need updates. Will they stop working without them? If you're asking about firmware we talked about, no. And I think that's with as much technology stuff as I do, it's something that always gets brought up as people say, "Oh, do I have to do this update?" Well, no, it's not like your device really knows that anything needs to change. I mean, it's just going to continue working the exact same way that it is working. And typically, the reason that there's a firmware update is because somebody found a problem with how it works. So they've come up with a solution to that for whoever actually did have a problem. Did you find those voltages, or are you looking?
I was still looking. He doesn't do a great job documenting. He puts a lot of data and a lot of content in his videos, and his videos are kind of long-winded. He may do a 2 or 3 hour video and he talks real slow, but so you can watch his videos about 2 times speed and
What was his
gain a lot of
name?
knowledge from it. I'll put a link here just a second.
Let's see here. Is his name Jack Ryan? You said
Jack Ricard.
Jack Ricard. Let's see here.
He did a really good job of the discharge curve of the Tesla module. I don't know if you've seen that image floating around, but
oh yeah, I have seen this guy. He's done a bunch of videos. He does.
oh yeah,
He
he's
does
been
take
doing
a long,
videos
long
since
time.
before YouTube was cool.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that later. But he always has a handkerchief, and he's always playing with it. I think
Yep.
it was.
Yeah, so he developed and built software wise. I think he's a software engineer or something from previous days, but he developed the software for the BMS I'm using, and so far it's been rock solid.
Has it done much as far as like actual amount of managing the batteries?
It keeps them balanced. It cuts the pack off when the temperature gets low,
Hmm.
temperature gets high. So it does its job.
I've been shocked at how balanced my packs are all the time. Like I for the most part I don't even turn on the little balancing boards I have, which I think that's a futile effort anyways because they're kind of built for like an RC pack, so they bleed off a little bit of power from whichever one's the highest. But I think an RC pack probably has like 4 or 5 little batteries in it, and these have hundreds. So I don't know that they would do anything, but from the day I got my Tesla batteries till now, it allows me to at least check each series string, and they're all perfect. I mean, they're off by like a thousandth of a volt or a couple thousandths.
Yeah, the Tesla stuff is not really doing anything different. I think it's just engaging some resistors in those circuits to bleed off a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
power. And if you look at the boards that come on the original modules, there's nothing fancy or big about them. They're just
Mm-hmm.
proprietary. And so it is very nice that I can look all in one interface and see the voltages of all 6 of my modules on one interface and
Mm-hmm.
see the low, the high. And the BMS does some really cool things. Basically, you can have your voltage cut off of the contactors actually be based on a cell voltage rather than
Oh,
the
that's
pack
cool.
voltage. And so you can actually tell your BMS if any pack gets above 4.18, 4.19 volts, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to shut the contactors off and keep these batteries safe. So you don't necessarily have to set your your high voltage cutoffs from a pack level and have to worry about a single cell getting overcharged. And actually, you can with this BMS, you can also engage a relay externally and also turn off your multiplus or your charge controller, your solar charge controller via the BMS as well if you wanted. So,
That's real cool.
yep.
You have to send me a link for that too. I'll take a look at it because I don't know if there even was one of those. There probably was when I was starting to build my system, but I didn't find anything I loved, so I just built my own, which
Yeah,
I have to say is
the
probably the thing I worry about the most.
The website is www.evtv.me. I put it in the chat there.
There you go.
Um, it is expensive. It's $1,300 for the kit. But when you add it all together, that kit comes with the BMS board with all the software loaded. It comes with 2 contactors. So I mean, if you add it together, it comes with temperature monitors built into the Tesla packs as well. So when you add all that stuff together, even if you built your own BMS, you've got your little balancers. I know those aren't expensive, but when
Mm-hmm.
you've got a couple of battery protects, if you're protecting your solar input and just your low voltage cutoff, like I believe you have.
I mean, it was all just cheap stuff off eBay, but I
Okay.
that's something that I don't love. I mean, I would like something a little more reliable. Well, it hasn't been unreliable, but something I trust a little more. So,
What do the battery protects cost?
the battery protect. Oh yeah, I didn't think about those. Those were 60, $70. They weren't all that bad.
Okay, okay.
So,
The big advantage cost wise with EVTV BMS is it's compatible with, I want to say, up to 40 modules in series or parallel.
mm-hmm.
And essentially the connector cable for the head ends of each pack you're connecting to, all of those are wired in a series, unrelated to the actual pack voltage side, but just the control module cable is just from one pack to the next pack to the next pack. And I think you can wire it up to 40 in series. So obviously the cost of the BMS, the more modules you have, the cheaper it gets.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you did an individual BMS, at some point you're going to be limited to how many cells you can monitor at once.
Sure. That's cool. Yeah, I'll take a look at it. Well, we still have no more questions, so I'm gonna say, unless you've got anything else exciting, we'll call it for this week, and
Yeah.
hopefully next week we can get a whole bunch more people. We could probably do a better job of that.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for everybody for joining, and I will look forward to next week.
See you again next time.
All right. Bye bye.